Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 7th Annual General Meeting of Beccles U3A. And congratulations to those of you who attended the first one. I don't think there's a gold watch for long service, but glad you're still there, and thank you. So today, the initial part of today's session is about the formal business of the AGM, and you'll have to forgive me if I look even more obviously like I am reading some of this, because I have a number of papers in front of me to make sure that I get it something like right. Forgive me a little bit if that seems a bit stilted and formulaic, but that's the nature of an AGM. So thank you for attending. On to the formal business of the AGM, and hopefully some of you at least have got an agenda in front of you so you can follow it, but it's hopefully not too complex. So item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence, and I have received them from Angela Kappa, Netta Swallow and Alec Hillier. So thank you for those. I would just say at this point, really impressed with the number of people who responded to our plea to complete the online form through the links, the emails that we sent out. That resulted in 146 members casting their votes. So very much appreciated that response. Thank you. Item 2 is around the minutes of last year's AGM, which took place on the 16th of September, and any matters arising from there. And you were all sent, one way or another, a copy of those minutes. I'm pleased that acceptance of them has been proposed by Susan Shannon and seconded by Peter Shannon. And the votes cast were 140 in favour of acceptance, 6 abstentions, and no votes against. So that those minutes are now accepted as a formal record of last year's meeting. Item 3 is the trustee annual report, which falls to me to produce in conjunction with the committee members. You will, I hope, be pleased to know that I'm not going to read out all the bullet points in the report that I sent out. Hopefully you've had a chance to read it and seen what a busy year it has been for us in a difficult time. But I am going to read out some of it, and I'm going to draw 1 or 2 highlights from my perspective. So hopefully you're sitting comfortably. As the past year has been so different for Beccles U3A and its members, I took you through the year, sharing with you what we have wrestled with. So these are the highlights, and no doubt some lowlights. Some, perhaps many U3As, took the decision to close for much or all of the year. We felt that we had a duty to our members to provide the best service we could in the circumstances. We recognised that it would be easier to keep those members with email and internet better informed than those without. Ideas like printed newsletters and phone buddies were operated during the year to try to address that issue, as well as multiple requests for contact if members needed help. So I'm now just going to pull out 1 or 2 highlights from my point of view. Going back to April last year, which was the first full month after the initial lockdown had been called, which obviously inevitably caused a curtailment of some of our activities. But we saw from April that the website started to feature Margaret Butterfield's weekly quizzes, and they remarkably continued for a year. So more about Margaret later. And we also held in April our first virtual meeting via YouTube with Nick Garrett on local theatre. And that was the first appearance also of Ryan Tackman, who provided invaluable technical help for us in making these things happen. Certainly outside my comfort zone, and perhaps others as well. In May, we introduced the phone buddy scheme for those members who perhaps were more isolated or not connected to email and the internet so that if they wanted someone to talk to, they could. And again, impressively, 20 volunteers telephoned an initial 124 members to see if they might be interested. And 21 of those members did indeed sign up. The scheme was repeatedly advertised to all members through newsletters, and I think some of those discussions and conversations and chats are still going on today, which is tremendous. In June, we introduced MailChimp, which you I'm sure all look forward to those bright yellow emails appearing in your inbox. Hopefully not your junk box, but in your inbox. And we introduced that in June to try to improve communications with members, and it's certainly been easier to send things out using the system, and also to track what is happening. We also introduced, under the leadership of a newish committee member, Steve Blackburn, COVID Group Recovery Grant. That was to help groups continue to meet in whatever way they chose during the various lockdowns and difficulties that we had. And a number of groups took advantage of that, which was great. In July, we moved into our first virtual evening meeting, where Matt Day talked about Beccles Lido. And I know many of you are fervent supporters of Beccles Lido, indeed attending early morning cold water swims at certain times during the year. Rather you than me, I have to say. But we also found Faye Bishop, who hosted a number of quizzes for us, and so we were grateful for that too. So that was another first that we put in place. Moving on to September, we held our AGM, delayed from June in the hope that we would be able to hold it in the public hall, but that proved impossible. And on that occasion, we had 85 members returning the online form, which I was very pleased with then. So this year's results are amazing. And we also had 163 households tuning into Andrew Baker analysing the best post-war Prime Minister, if you remember it. And those were the days when the attendances for the monthly meetings were well over 150, whether they were live at the time of screening or indeed on catch-up. And numbers have dwindled a little bit since then, which I guess is because people have found other things to do. In December, we had our normal, I say normal because I don't think any of them are normal, Christmas festive production organised by Moo Gerbert and her merry band of elves, this year based on Brother Heinrich, with socially distanced performances recorded by, I think it was Paul Gerbert in the main, and then put together by Ryan. In addition to that, Jeff Lavery gave a brilliant insight into his musical career and conducting in particular. December also saw Jim Savage, our membership secretary, and Ryan again designing a new electronic renewal form to assist members in the process of renewal. You will recall, and hopefully we'll get back to it again, that we have a very successful March session where members drop into the public hall to renew their membership. Well, obviously we couldn't do that in this year, so we designed this form, and I think around 200 people renewed their membership that way. So obviously successful, and thank you all for doing that. In March, so quite recently now, we were making appeals for a new treasurer to come forward to take the place of Carol, who had carried out 6 years of service for Beccles U3A as treasurer. And the rules, even though we try our best to be flexible about the application of rules, prevent us from extending that any further than 6 years in the same role. So we made pleas wherever we could for someone to come forward, and delighted that Lynn Wood responded to that call and has agreed to take on the role, and is in the middle of some induction and training from Carol, so she understands the systems that we use. So very grateful that that took place. So that's a whistle-stop tour through the events of the year. As I said, you've all had a copy of the report, so you can see what else was going on if you wish. Just a few other things just to read through, really. We started the year, this would have been in April 2020, with 685 members. And following the renewal process, this dropped to 575. Now, it's quite typical that we lose 100 members at each time we do the renewals process. That's for a variety of reasons, people moving on, etc., or no longer being able to attend or losing interest, I guess. But that's in the difficult times. That's a tremendous response from members. So again, thank you. The monthly meetings, the virtual monthly meetings have attracted good audiences, as I said earlier, and we were averaging 170 household viewings each talk, probably up until about March of this year, I would say. And when I say 170 households, some of those households, of course, have two members in them. So the actual numbers of people viewing have been higher than that. So thank you for your interest in those events. Talking of events, unfortunately, they had to be postponed and then cancelled for the last year. And Irene Squirrel, who has performed this role heroically for many years now, has decided to retire from the post. So we do need a replacement or replacements, please. So do come forward if you can. Just want to say a few words about group conveners. Unfortunately, a number have stood down or moved on to other things in recent months. So it's a big thank you to Peter Westmacott for looking after classical music too, Shirley Mead for Nimble Fingers, Parvez Shaheen Philosophy, Mandy Smith the Reading Group, Jill Leftwich Yoga, Jan Oakley Coffee Morning, Andy House Digital Photography, and Anthony Laceby Latin for looking after these groups and making them happen. And if I miss someone out, which wouldn't surprise me at all, I thank those as well. A big thank you to pay attention to this bit. A big thank you to Lissy Yates, who has bent over backwards to take yoga on. John Salter developing into convener for digital photography. And to Graham Wilkinson for stepping into Jan's shoes. A tight fit, I am sure. Also want to recognise a couple of other groups for things that they have done that I'm aware of. To the French groups who've introduced Boule on the quay. I don't know what sort of audience they got from other walkers around the quay, but a tremendous initiative, and I'm sure it was enjoyed, except when the quay was underwater. Some floating Boule, maybe, I don't know. Table tennis too, who have heroically met outdoors on a number of occasions at the outdoor table tennis facilities that are dotted around the town. And if you want to know where one is, all you have to do is ask the table tennis group. They found it. Doesn't matter whether wind, rain or sun, someone would be there trying to hit a ball over a table. And also to the creative writing group for a set of short stories that the members wrote for inclusion in the Christmas newsletter. Very entertaining reading, I found. Okay, so that's it in terms of the trustee report. Thank you for everything that everyone has done during the year. Just move on now to item 4, the treasurer's report. And I've just got a little bit to read through, probably from that, because it's a little bit of a challenging year, I suppose, in some respects. So the Treasurer's report on our finances is covered in item 4 on the agenda. We started the year with total balances of £18,760 and ended in March 2021 with £20,400. These figures reflect the successful renewals programme in March, and we are grateful that so many of our members have appreciated our efforts during a difficult year and are looking forward to resuming U3A activities. As the year progresses, we are regularly paying out money rather than receiving it, but our overall position is healthy. The figures in March show our highest balance in any year, and as the year progresses, our balance declines to its lowest level in December/January of each year. That sits at typically about 60% of the year-end figure. Of course, we didn't know what 2021-22 would hold for Beccles U3A. Some U3As who renewed memberships before us told of a 40% reduction in membership. Some U3As closed for much of the year, others ran a few things. Some decided to reduce or waive their fees for the new year, especially if they had ceased operating. We calculated some figures based on what may be ahead of us, and the committee took the following into consideration. A 40% reduction of members would reduce our income by around £3,000. Our difficulties for some while in recruiting a replacement treasurer meant that we were considering whether we would have to use external accountants for a period of time, and that could have cost us at least £5,000. So we're very grateful that Lynn came forward to step in. We also recognised that Carol had, I suppose you'd call them, grandparent rights to the use of the Sage software that we have, as purchased a few years ago. But as the license name changes, we would have to pay fees for the use of that software, or indeed for any other alternative accounting software that we used. And we also were a little concerned that we may have to do something about our website. There were some discussions about the role of the website, which may have meant that we needed to buy a new website, and that again would have cost us £5,000. Very, very fortunately, Angela Williams agreed to carry on with the site that we have got. So again, that went in our favour. But had all those things happened and not gone in our favour, then we would have run out of money. So the decision was made to leave fees as they were and look at the position when the above factors were concluded. With hindsight, all of them have worked out, and so we are financially well off and in a secure position to move forward with confidence. So we would welcome suggestions from members as to how we can use the funds to encourage and support our membership. This is a unique opportunity to expand and improve as we return to a more normal life. So please let us have your ideas relating to monthly meetings, speakers, groups, activities, anything that you think that the money could be put to good use in helping and supporting our members. Changing tack slightly, gift aid is a significant contributor to our funds, and a big thank you to our treasurer, Carol Moore, for ploughing through all the paperwork to ensure we recover 25% of qualifying fees from HMRC. Isn't it nice to get something back from the tax office? Group grants have understandably declined during the year, with the COVID-19 group support grant taking its place, with just over £700 being paid out. Now is the time to think if a grant would help your group to restart with new facilities or resources. COVID-19 grants are still available and may help your group to restart in a changed way during the transition period. So that's an update on finances. I hope that's helped you. Again, if I find the right bit of paper, we had the same positive response to the Treasurer's report. 104 was proposed. The acceptance was proposed by Felicity Hillier and seconded by Alec Hillier. And we had 143 votes in favour, 3 abstentions, and no votes against. So thank you again for that. Item 5 is around approval of the appointment of examiner of the accounts. And for the last couple of years, we've been using Newman & Co. So the proposal was that we continue to use Newman & Co. in Beccles. That's been proposed by Peter Norfolk and seconded by Sally Norfolk. And again, the votes were 144 in favour, 2 abstentions, and no one against. So thank you again for that. Item 6 moves on to the thorny subject of election of committee members. The current officers of the executive committee, that's chair, vice chair, secretary and treasurer, were elected at the 2018 AGM and able to serve for 3 years. The 2 vice chairs were approved at the 2020 AGM last year. As I've said earlier, Carol is standing down as treasurer after serving the maximum of 6 years, and Lynn Wood has come forward to replace her. As there are no other nominations, Mary Wright has offered to serve an additional year as business secretary and myself as an additional year as chair. So we've both done 3 years. We're extending that to a 4th year, which we're able to do in line with our constitution. So that means that going forward for the next year, the chair is myself, vice chairs are Pippa Holiday and Glyn or Jim Savage, business secretary is Mary Wright, and the treasurer is Lynn Wood. Again, we have a proposer, and that is Andrew Evans, seconded by Anne Evans, and 145 in favour, 1 abstention and none against. Moving on, within item 6, 1 member of the committee is due to stand down due to length of service, and we thank John Matthews for his support. Janet Lloyd is also due to stand down after serving 3 years, but again has offered to serve for another year in line with our constitution. So the following are able to continue to serve on the committee for another year or 2. That's Steve Blackburn, Lou Gerbert, Rosemary Kerridge and Pauline Ketlis. So again, we have a proposer. In favour of that is Linda Ayres, and seconded by another Linda Savage. And this time there was 143 votes in favour, 3 abstentions, and no one against. So again, that is carried. So thank you again for your support. Item 7 relates to constitutional changes, and I'm absolutely delighted that none have been proposed, so no more to talk about on that. Similarly, item 8, motions, again pleased that, I suppose I'm pleased, it makes life easier. No motions have been submitted, so we move on again from that. And item 9 is a vote of thanks, not only to the retiring members of the committee, but also to a few others that I'd like to do. But particularly of note, as I've said a few times now, Carol Moore is retiring, having served 6 years as treasurer and member of the committee. She's not just been the holder of the purse strings and an advisor of all matters financial, but she's been a valuable member of the committee, offering her wisdom and advice and comments, and that has been much appreciated by everyone who's been on the existing committee and previous committees. She's been a tremendous asset for Beccles U3A and will be sadly missed, but I'm sure Lynn will quickly step into her shoes and provide as valuable a service as Carol has. Again, a thank you to John Matthews for having done 3 years on the committee. A year and a bit of that, of course, has been during lockdown, which has been a little bit difficult for him. But we thank him for coming forward and standing anyway. And Irene, who again we mentioned previously, who is retiring as events coordinator. You never know, we may be able to persuade her one day to step back into the role, but we would appreciate people coming forward to step in and do some of that work for us, which would be very useful. Thank you. I just want to move on to the item, well, more of item 9 about thank yous. I have a list here. And I'm bound to have forgotten someone, so forgive me if I have. I'd like to thank all the committee members over the last year who have embraced Zoom so that we could hold regular meetings and have showed their determination to keep the U3A open. There's been universal support of that we should be doing our best. to support members during this difficult time. So I thank them for their support on that. To Angela Williams and Felicity Hillier for the tremendous work they have carried out on the website during a difficult year of some ups and downs. The highlights that they have mentioned to me, amongst a range of things that they have done, is introducing an entertainments page, which, amongst a range of things, featured Margaret Butterfield's weekly quiz. And as I said, she did it every week for a year. So a massive thanks to Margaret for doing that, and almost single-handedly continuing one of the U3A mantras of member learning. And I'm sure we've all learned something if we carried out her quizzes. Coming back to Angela and Felicity, they carried out in an early part of 2021 a major update to the appearance of the website to bring that in line with the U3A styling, and have made other some subtle and some significant changes to the appearance of the website, which has boosted viewings over the last few months. So a massive thank you for the work they have done. Once again to Felicity for encouraging us to donate laptops to schools when that was a high issue on people's agendas in the new year, to try to help kids learn remotely. To Graham Wilkinson for his regular emails to me with a range of suggestions on how we might be able to do things slightly differently, and I'm sure some of those will come into fruition over the next few months. Moo Gerbert for working tirelessly to produce 2 speakers a month for a year. That may sound straightforward, but believe me, it isn't. It's been an interesting period, but Moo has done a brilliant job in finding a tremendous range of speakers, I think. To conveners and other group members who worked hard and embraced new thinking to keep their groups going, whether it be meeting socially or from a learning point of view over Zoom, or doing some of the outdoor activities that we've been able to. I've mentioned him once or twice, but a thank you to Ryan Tackman for his technical input to so much of what we do, whether it's the monthly meetings, whether it's design of forms, whether it's the forms that sit behind the links that you complete, certainly way outside of my comfort zone, as I've said before. And also to Faye Bishop for hosting a number of the evening quizzes, which provided some entertainment over the winter months. A massive thank you to our speakers for embracing our version of technology to present an excellent assortment of talks, and members who do send their comments through in whatever means they can. That is appreciated by me and also by the speakers. So thank you again for that. To Diane Dungate for her brilliant work at minuting all the committee meetings held via Zoom. If you think it's difficult enough minuting a meeting that takes place in public where you can all see each other, it is much more difficult over something like Zoom. So she's done a tremendous job in keeping us informed about what we said last month, which is always useful. And finally, to all the members who continue to support Beccles U3A, we exist for yourselves. But it's also the success of the organisation is down to you and how much you contribute and the part that you play in the operation of Beccles U3A. So long may that continue. Thank you. And that takes us to item 10, which is any other business, and I've not been notified of any other business, so I'm assuming that there is none. So I would just like to say that's the conclusion to the formal part of the business, the AGM. Thank you for paying attention and following that, and hope that was useful if it didn't go on too long. Okay, we now need to move on to the main part, or not the main part, but the second part of the meeting. Just a few words from me. I know you're probably fed up with my voice. I do apologise, but you should have received, or you will any day now, a copy of the latest newsletter, which asks you to let us have your response to 3 issues, I think it is. Firstly, we are somewhere between hoping and expecting to hold the July meeting on the 21st in Beccles Public Hall. And we do have a speaker lined up, Beccles' own Robert Tilney, who will talk about Antiques Roadshow. So, but we can only do that if we get a feel that there will be enough people who are prepared to come along. If that's the case, and early feedback would indicate that it is, then we will obviously send more information out near the time when we know whether there are any restrictions in place from the government. The public hall is now well experienced at holding events with restrictions and distancing in place. So we'll just agree with them what that is and comply as we need to. The second one is getting your feedback about a suggested trip out in August to Southwell, just outside Southwell, to for walks and a cafe, and then an afternoon showing on the Thorrington Outdoor Theatre, which is a new round-shaped theatre that's been constructed recently, and they have an interesting range of performances on, and we've picked 2 potential dates. So again, that's something that we can organise if there is enough interest, and so far that looks promising. So, but do look at the information that you get and let us know what you think. Third one is for some seats that we have reserved at in Lowestoft at the Players Theatre for the Lowestoft Players production of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, and I'm sure many of you will know a lot of the songs that are famous from that. The particularly notable event, a notable aspect of this event, is it is the first amateur adult production of Joseph in the country. Now you may well think, well, hang on, now there's been loads of those. Well, no, there hasn't. They're normally performed by professional groups, either in the West End or touring the country, or by schools. This is the first licence that's been issued to an amateur musical theatre group, an adult group. So that may be of interest to you. You put that in your memoirs that you were there. So hopefully you'll respond to that as well. The government latest delay to reopening causes some difficulties with groups restarting, but planning at least can take place. As I said, we're expecting to hold the next monthly meeting in Beccles Public Hall. More will come out about that in due course. As I said as well, we hoped to hold today's AGM in the hall, but we decided against it. But we needed to find a speaker who could either attend the hall or do something online. And having listened to Tony Diamond last year talking about the Hoxton Hoard, we have brought him back today to talk to us about Sir John Betjeman. Unfortunately, as they say in lots of award shows, he can't be with us in person, so his talk is recorded. So that makes asking questions not quite so easy to do. But if you do have a question and you want an answer from him, then still post it as you would do, either directly to me or to Beccles U3A or on the Gmail provision, and I'm sure he will do his best to answer it. So now you'll be very pleased to know a change of voice, and I will pass on to Tony Diamond to talk about Sir John Betjeman.
I'm going to talk to you today about John Betjeman. Luco Chambers, Liverpool, 1976. I was a student and I had to go for my final poetry examination. Guildhall Board of Examination, Poetry Practical. Your examination will consist of 3 recitals and 1 declamation. That's a Shakespeare poem, a Victorian poem, and a 20th century poem. Your declamation will be an impromptu response to a main question presented by the panel, and you'll get 55% of your marks for that 1 question. Tony, you should recite a Betjeman poem for your recital number 3, because the head of the panel is known to be a close friend of John Betjeman. John who? Sir John Betjeman, the poet laureate. But as for the main question you'll get, it's anybody's guess. Probably it will be Shakespeare, and that you do well on that one. There were 4 people in the hall when I went in for my examination. There were a panel, 3 people, and a clerk taking notes at the side who never spoke and did nothing. Just relax when you're very, very nervous in an examination like that. Do you enjoy cricket, young man? Asked the very, very horsey lady who spoke exclusively in cricketing metaphors. Hit us for 6 with recital 1, Shakespeare. Bowl or not to bowl? That is the question. Well played, young man. And your Victorian poet? Come on to the wicket, Maud, for the black bat night has flown. This is Tennyson. Very good. Now, please recite your 20th century poem. Well, that's Norfolk by John Betjeman. How did the devil come? When first attack, these Norfolk lanes recall lost innocence. The years fall off and find me walking back, dragging a stick along the wooden fence down this same path where 40 years ago my father strolled behind me, calm and slow. I used to fill my hands with sorrel seeds and shower him with them from the tops of stiles, and my head into his tweeds to make him hurry down those languorous miles of ash and alder-shaded lanes till here our moorings and the masthead would appear. There after supper, lit by lantern light, warm in the cabin, I could lie secure. And here, against the polished sides at night, the lap, lap, lapping of the weedy Bure, a whispering and watery Norfolk sound, telling of all the moonlit reeds around. How did the devil come? When first attack? The church is just the same, though now I know Fowler of Louth restored it. Time, bring back the rapturous ignorance of long ago. Peace before the dreadful daylight starts, of unkept promises and broken hearts. Thank you, young man, well done. Now, for your declamation, let it be Shakespeare, let it be Shakespeare, please, Shakespeare. Please tell us all you know about the early life of John Betjeman. What? John Betjeman? His early life? I knew nothing. I knew nothing, absolutely nothing. We're waiting, young man. You can't simply say, please ask me another one. So here I go, in for a penny, in for a pound. Well, after being kicked out of Oxford for a drunken scandal with a Don's wife, which comes straight out of Brideshead Revisited, he went to sea on a whaling vessel, and now I'm in Moby Dick. Oh, yes. He went to Dodge City as a deputy sheriff. I just made that up. He went to Africa and voyaged up the Limpopo River. You know where I am there? I'm in Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. He went to India to study levitation with a fakir and was deported for drunkenness. Yes, of course he was, because then I'm in A Passage to India by E.M. Forster. I know my literature. He became involved in a scandal, another scandal at Cairo University. Shocking. That's from Fortunes of War. Now thank you, young man. We'll let you know. Very good. My tutor was waiting outside and she asked me, what was my declamation question? I told her it was about the early life of John Betjeman. That was John Betjeman, sitting at the side, taking notes. What? 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 Well, after I left, he probably said, oh, yes, spot on. That's exactly what happened, because I got a distinction. That was good, wasn't it? If you really want to know about the early life of John Betjeman, read Summoned by Bells. He was born at Parliament Hill Mansions, Hampstead, in 1906. He moved to this house in Highgate in 1909. His father, grandfather, and great-grandfather made furniture for the well-to-do. This is a mahogany dressing table. This is a lady's dressing table. And this is a writing desk. You'll notice the extra N in the name Betjeman. As a boy, Betjeman made it very clear he would never want any involvement in the family business. As soon as I could read and write, I knew that I would be a poet. John Betjeman's nanny was a religious fanatic who told him that he was going to burn in hell. How did the devil come? That was his nanny. For all of his life, he was tormented by fear of sin, death, and hell. He was intensely religious, and T.S. Eliot was his very first teacher at preparatory school. Later on, he moved to Marlborough College, Wiltshire, and there he said this about it: "My greatest moment of sexual ecstasy, the greatest in my entire life, was enjoyed with the vicar's son while I was at Marlborough." Anthony Blunt, aged 16 at the time, was the son of a vicar, and he was thought to be the illegitimate child of King George V. Were they father and son? Was he the half-brother to King Edward VIII? In 1959, Anthony Blunt became surveyor of the Queen's Art, and in 1979, he was outed as one of the Cambridge Russian spies. John Betjeman moved on to Magdalen College, Oxford, and there he was in the same class as W.H. Auden, Louis MacNeice, and also Evelyn Waugh. Evelyn Waugh, in his book Brideshead Revisited, based the character of Lord Sebastian Flyte on John Betjeman, walking around with a teddy bear around Oxford. But C.S. Lewis was one of their dons at Oxford, and Betjeman said this of him: "The very first thing I heard him say to me was, 'No, you're wrong.'" And C.S. Lewis, of course, was the author of the Chronicles of Narnia and the Screwtape Letters and other wonderful works, but he really didn't like Betjeman at all. And this was said of him: "C.S. Lewis was vile to John Betjeman, and we all hated him for it. He called John Betjeman a poor player of whom we'll hear no more." He was still saying that 30 years later. Auden said of C.S. Lewis, he died apparently on the 22nd of November 1963, a very famous date. And Auden said this: "I heard C.S. Lewis died today. He didn't suffer. Such a pity." In the 1930s, John Betjeman wrote weekly letters to Lord Alfred Douglas asking about Oscar Wilde. Lord Alfred Douglas was, of course, Bosie, who brought Oscar Wilde to ruination. And after Oxford, Betjeman became friendly with the Duke of Devonshire and the Mitford sisters. On one occasion in 1928, he spent the weekend at Biddiston House with the oldest Mitford girl, who was Diana Mitford, and she later wrote this in a book. "John had a bad dream in which a ghost handed him a note with the date of his death on it. The date was the 19th of May, 1984. Diana Mitford, of course, went on to marry Sir Oswald Mosley at the home of Joseph Goebbels in 1936. And later, here they were, and they were both interned during World War II as enemies of the state. In 1933, Betjeman married Penelope Chetwode, and they had 2 children, Paul and Candida. But even before World War II, as his poetry books began to sell, Betjeman was recognized as the poet of the English middle classes. He, of course, considered himself to be middle class, and he was obsessed with all things to do with class, all things English, the class system, tea and toast, marmalade, Sturmey Archer gears, and the Church of England, above all, the Church of England. He was obsessed with railway stations, and his work was campaigning to save many British rail stations, such as Weybridge. His successful efforts to save Paddington Station brought him national recognition. And he was one of the very first environmentalists, warning in the 1930s about pollution. "Come friendly bombs and fall on Slough, it isn't fit for humans now. And if there is some scenery, some unpretentious greenery surviving anywhere, it does not need protecting, for soon we'll be erecting a power station there." He loved the quaint oddities of English life. This is a poem called "In a Bath Tea Shop." "Let us not speak, for the love we bear one another Let us hold hands and look. She's such a very ordinary little woman. He's such a thumping crook. But both for a moment little lower than the angels. In the tea shop's inglenook. During World War II, Betjeman joined the Ministry of Information in neutral Dublin, and he used his social contacts there in Dublin to provide MI5 with intelligence on the IRA. He was a British spy. An IRA team identified him and they were sent to shoot him dead in a pub. But the local IRA boss was in that pub at the time and told them to get lost because we don't shoot poets, and besides, he's composing. This is a poem called In Westminster Abbey, which shows John Betjeman's love for all things English during the war. Let me take this other glove off, as the Vox Humana swells, and the beauteous fields of Eden bask beneath the Abbey bells. Here, where England's statesmen lie, listen to a lady's cry. Gracious Lord, oh bomb the Germans, spare their women for thy sake. And if that is not too easy, we will pardon thy mistake. But gracious Lord, whate'er shall be, don't let anyone bomb me. Keep our empire undismembered, guide our forces by thy hand. Gallant blacks from far Jamaica, Honduras and Togoland. Protect them, Lord, in all their fights, and even more, protect the whites. Think of what our nation stands for. Books from boots and country lanes, free speech, free passes, class distinction, democracy and proper drains. Lord, put beneath thy special care 189 Cadogan Square. Although, dear Lord, I am a sinner, I have done no major crime. Now I'll come to evening service, whensoever I have the time. So, Lord, reserve for me a crown, and do not let my shares go down. Now I feel a little better. What a treat to hear thy word, where the bones of leading statesmen have so often been interred. And now, dear Lord, I cannot wait, because I have a luncheon date. In the 1950s, sales of John Betjeman's books soared. He became the best-selling poet in Britain. He also provided the shell guides, maps of different parts of the country. And T.S. Eliot became his publisher at this time, so that everything was published very quickly and very successfully. He always liked big English girls. Pam, I adore you. Pam, you great big mountainous sports girl. And he loved the oddities of English sporting life, such as Hunter Trials, about a little girl with a pony. Oh, wasn't it naughty of Smudges? Oh, Mummy, I'm sick with disgust. She threw me in front of the judges, and my silly old collarbones bust. He wrote this poem, Upper Lambourne, about the town in Berkshire, which is filled with stud farms and horse training stables. Up the ash tree climbs the ivy, up the ivy climbs the sun. With the 20,000 pattering has a valley breeze begun. Feathery ash, neglected elder, shift the shade and make it run. Shift the shade toward the nettles, and the nettles set it free to streak the stained Carrara headstone where, in 1923, he who trained 100 winners paid the final entrance fee. Leathery limbs of Upper Lambourne, leathery skin from sun and wind, leathery breeches, spreading stables, shining saddles left behind. To the down the string of horses, moving out of sight and mind. Feathery ash in leathery Lambourne waves above the sarsen stone, and Edwardian plantations so coniferously moan as to make the swelling downland far surrounding seem their own. John Betjeman always mocked himself. He was on TV and radio every week, and he became the nation's teddy bear. His wife became a Roman Catholic, and his marriage suffered as he strayed. He became very friendly with Princess Margaret and her friends, and in 1951 he was invited to a very important dinner with Sir Anthony Blunt. Guy Burgess, one of the guests, did not attend that night because he was busy fleeing from the country because he had been unmasked that very day as a Russian spy. But instead, Princess Margaret brought a young lady called Elizabeth Cavendish, and John Betjeman consorted with her, one of the daughters of the Duke of Devonshire, until his death in 1984. Although everybody knew about it, no newspaper would even think of publishing the details at the time. And Harold Wilson had a wife called Mary Wilson, who incidentally came from Diss, and she was very good friends with John Betjeman. He wrote this to Mary Wilson, something about Diss in 1964, A Mind's Journey to Diss. Dear Mary, yes, it will be bliss to go with you by train to Diss. Your walking shoes upon your feet will meet my sweet at Liverpool Street. But levellers we may be reckoned, perhaps we'd better travel second, or lest reporters on us burst, perhaps we'd better travel first. Above the chimney pots we'll go, through Stepney, Stratford, Attybow, and out to where the Essex marsh is filled with houses new and harsh, till Whittam past, the landscape yields on left and right to widening fields, flint church towers sparkling in the light, black beams and weatherboarding white, cricket bat willows silvery green, and elmy hills with brooks between. Maltings and saltings, stack and key, and somewhere near the great North Sea, then further gentle undulations with lonelier and less frequent stations, till in the dimmest place of all, the train slows down into a crawl and stops in silence. Where is this? Dear Mary Wilson, this is Diss. Harold Wilson approved of his friendship with Mary Wilson, and also Marcia Falkender, his secretary, helped along with the publishing. And John Betjeman continued to consort with Lady Elizabeth Cavendish right up to the time he died. Here they are pictured in 1976 at his house in Trebetherick, where they lived. But John Betjeman worshipped at St. Endoc Church, and he was always acutely aware of his unending propensity for continued adultery with beautiful women. He wrote this poem about that very issue. Oh, would I could subdue the flesh which sadly troubles me, and then perhaps could view the flesh as though I never knew the flesh, and merry misery, to see the golden hiking girl with wind about her hair, the tennis-playing biking girl, the holy to my liking girl, to see and not to care. At sundown on my tricycle, I tore the borough's edge, and icy as an icicle, see bicycle by bicycle, stack waiting in the hedge. Get down from me, I thunder there, you spaniels, shut your jaws. Your teeth are stuffed with underwear, suspenders torn asunder there, and buttocks in your paws. Oh, whip the dogs away, my lord, they make me ill with lust. Bend bare knees down to pray, my lord, teeth sulky lips to say, my lord, that flaxen hair is dust. Betjeman was always full of guilt for his sinful actions. This poem is called Late Flowering Lust. My head is bald, my breath is bad, and shaven is my chin. I have not now the joys I had when I was young in sin. I run my fingers down your dress with brandy certain aim, and you respond to my caress and maybe feel the same. I have a picture of my own on this reunion night, wherein two skeletons are shown to hold each other tight. Dark sockets look on emptiness, which once was loving eyes. The mouth that opens for a kiss has got no tongue inside. Too long we let our bodies cling, we cannot hide disgust at all the thoughts that in us spring from this late flowering lust. He was knighted in 1969 and became Poet Laureate in 1972. As his health deteriorated, he made very few public appearances. He developed Parkinson's disease and had several very serious operations. He was convinced that he would die in a state of sin before the anesthetic or a real fright. Intolerably sad, profound, St. Giles's bells are ringing round. They bring the slanting summer rain to tap the chestnut boughs again, whose shadowy cave of rainy leaves the gusty belfry song receives, intolerably sad and true. Victorian red and jewel blue, the mellow bells are ringing round, and charge the evening light with sound. And I look motionless from bed, on heavy trees and purple red, and hear the midland bricks and tiles thrown back, the bells of stone St. Giles. Bells, ancient now as castle walls, now hard and new as pitch pine stalls, now full with help from ages past, now dull with death and hell at last. Swing up and give me hope of life, swing down and plunge the surgeon's knife. I, breathing for a moment, see death wing himself away from me, and think as on this bed I lie, is it extinction when I die? I move my limbs and use my sight, not yet, thank God, not yet the night. Or better far those echoing hells, half threatened in the pealing bells, than that this I should cease to be. Come quickly, Lord, come quick to me. St. Giles's bells are asking now, and hast thou known the Lord, hast thou? St. Giles's bells they richly ring, and was that Lord or Christ the King? St. Giles's bells they hear me call, I never knew the Lord at all. Oh, not in me your Saviour dwells, you ancient rich St. Giles's bells. Illuminated missals, spires, wide screens and decorated choirs, all these I loved, and on my knees I thanked myself for knowing these, and watched the morning sunlight pass through richly stained Victorian glass, and in the colour-shafted air I kneeling thought the Lord was there. Now lying in the gathering mist, I know that Lord did not exist. Now lest this I should cease to be, come, real Lord, come quick to me. With every gust the chestnut sighs, with every breath the mortal dies. The man who smiled alone, alone, and went his journey on his own with, will give my wife this letter, in case of course I don't get better, waits for his coffin lid to close on waxen head and yellow toes. Almighty Saviour, had I faith, there'd be no fight with kindly death. Intolerably long and deep St. Giles's bells swing on in sleep. But still you go from here alone, say all the bells about the throne. This is Betjeman with Mary Wilson in the last months of his life. In one of the last television programs he did, he said if he had any regrets, and the only one he had was, I wish I'd had more sex. He composed this poem in his last months. Now that the harvest is over and the world cold, give me the gift of laughter as I lose hold. He died on the 19th of May, 1984, the very date that had been told him in a dream so many years before. Here's a picture of the coffin being borne across the grass to St. Enedoc's Church. As the funeral cortege approached the churchyard, the most terrible rainstorm fell, forcing the bearers to leave the coffin by the gate until the rain had abated. This is St. Enedoc's St. Enedoc Church, Cornwall, where he's buried. And it looks out over the golf links and the sea there. This is his headstone. And poets come and read poetry. Entire families come and read poetry near the grave of John Betjeman. This is the John Betjeman Centre, Wadebridge, Cornwall, which was set up in his memory after he died and contains all of the furniture from his home, including the last hat that he ever wore and the typewriter that he did all of his work on. This statue is erected at St. Pancras Station in London in his memory. And if you want to know one of the most beautiful poems, I'll leave it for you to look up regarding John Betjeman. It is Indoor Games near Newbury. John Betjeman, wonderful poet laureate, gentleman, kind man. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Tony, for another interesting presentation delivered in your inimitable style. And I think I got my teeth around that. tremendous use of images, and a comment from Ron French to that note, saying a great visual. So thank you, Ron, for that. And your previous comment, how wonderful and nostalgic it was. And yes, these stories about people always bring back memories. And it's surprising how people knew other people and what links they had with people who have been in the news at various times in the past. So again, another entertaining take with Tony's approach to these talks. So grateful for him, and I will send a thank you to him. And if you've got any more messages, then please come forward with them so I can send them on to him. So that virtually concludes today's AGM and talk. Thank you for joining us, either live or later on if you still use the catch up button. As I said earlier, it is our hope that the next meeting on July the 21st will be in Beccles Public Hall, and whatever requirements we need to have in place, we will have. But it's still good to get your feedback in response to the question we've asked us. And there's no names associated to this. It's just a simple straw poll to find out whether there are enough people who may well be interested in coming out. If you feel that that's not the right time for you, then hopefully you will gradually become more confident as the weeks go by, and we will see you again at another monthly meeting. Once again, thank you for joining us today, and look forward to seeing you next time. Have a good week. Thank you. Bye-bye.